Hello, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. How much of your life have you spent worrying about what others think, about chasing things that never really mattered? Now imagine waking up at 61 and realizing none of that ever truly did. There is a point in life where you begin to see things more clearly, not through the lens of urgency or ambition, but through the wisdom of lived experience. One of the most liberating realizations is that the constant need for approval starts to fade. When you're younger, you often shape your identity around how people perceive you. You seek validation from family, friends, co-workers, even strangers. It becomes a silent addiction, the desire to be liked, admired, accepted. You spend energy trying to meet expectations that were never truly your own. Every choice is weighed against the potential reaction of others. What will they say? What will they think? But as you grow older, especially beyond the age of 61, you start to recognize the futility in that pursuit. You've seen how fickle people's opinions can be. You've witnessed how easily praise can turn to criticism, and how approval can shift with the wind. You begin to ask, whose voice really matters in my life? And more often than not, the answer is your own. The opinions of others become background noise to your inner voice, the voice that has grown stronger through trials, mistakes, and triumphs. This isn't about arrogance. It's about self-respect. It's about giving yourself permission to live authentically without constantly seeking external validation. It's about understanding that you don't owe anyone an explanation for living in a way that brings you peace. When you stop living for applause, you start living with purpose. Approval is a moving target. It changes with trends, with moods, with opinions, but authenticity is rooted. It doesn't waver because it's built on your values, your truth. And when you live in alignment with your truth, you inspire others to do the same. As the approval fades, something powerful happens. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to hear your own instincts louder than the world's opinions. You realize that some of the most important decisions you'll ever make require courage, not consensus. And with each decision made in alignment with who you truly are, confidence grows. Not the kind built on ego, but the kind that says, I know who I am. I know what matters to me. Equally transformative is the realization that the pursuit of perfection no longer holds value. The pressure to be flawless in appearance, in career, in relationships, is a weight many carry for decades. You grow up believing that perfection is the ticket to acceptance and success. But over time, you begin to see that perfection is a myth. It's a constantly shifting standard that no one ever truly reaches. And in chasing it, you often lose touch with what makes you beautifully human. Perfection teaches us to hide our flaws, to mask our struggles, to deny our vulnerability. But what truly connects people, what truly builds character, is not perfection but authenticity. It's the courage to say, I've failed, but I've learned. I've been hurt, but I've healed. I'm not perfect, but I'm real. When you reach a stage in life where the masks come off, you begin to value growth over appearance, honesty over image, depth over decoration. The scars you carry tell stories of resilience. The lines on your face tell stories of laughter and survival. These are not imperfections. They are evidence of a life lived with passion and endurance. You no longer chase flawlessness because you realize the pursuit itself is flawed. Instead, you choose to grow, to evolve, to be whole, not perfect. Letting go of perfection is not giving up, it's growing up. It's the recognition that the goal was never to impress the world. It was to love yourself, to know yourself, and to express yourself without shame. When you reach that point, life becomes less about trying to be enough for others and more about recognizing that you've always been enough for yourself. That is where peace begins. That is where purpose takes root. One of the most draining habits we develop early in life is the tendency to compare ourselves to others. It's almost automatic. You look at someone else's career and suddenly yours feels inadequate. You see someone's vacation photos, their home, their lifestyle, and begin to question your own progress. It's easy to fall into this trap because the world constantly encourages it. Social media, advertising, even casual conversations often paint a picture of what success is supposed to look like. But what nobody tells you when you're young is that comparison is a thief. It doesn't just steal your joy, it steals your focus, your self-worth, your sense of purpose. By the time you reach 61, you begin to see through the illusion. You recognize that every life has its own rhythm. That person who seemed ahead of you in one area may be struggling deeply in another. The highlight reels you envied were just carefully edited moments, not the full story. And more importantly, you realize that the only person you're meant to compete with is the version of yourself from yesterday. Real growth happens when you shift your attention inward, when you ask, am I better than I was a year ago? Am I living in alignment with what truly matters to me? The truth is, no one walks your path exactly. No one faces the same mix of experiences, obstacles, and opportunities. Your life can't be measured against someone else's blueprint. Once you embrace that truth, you unlock a sense of freedom. You start cheering for others instead of resenting their success. You begin to celebrate your own journey, even if it looks nothing like what the world told you it should. Gratitude becomes your compass. Instead of obsessing over what you lack, you become deeply aware of what you have, and that awareness turns into peace. Peace that allows you to enjoy your life instead of constantly evaluating it. Another shift that becomes clear with age is the declining importance of material accumulation. In your younger years, success is often measured by how much you own. Houses, cars, gadgets, designer clothes. Society teaches you that having more means being more. You buy, you collect, you upgrade, hoping each new item brings more satisfaction. And for a while it seems to work, but then the excitement fades, the new becomes normal, and the hunger returns. You realize it was never about the stuff. It was about the feeling you thought the stuff would bring. After 61, your perspective deepens. You begin to value simplicity over accumulation. The home filled with memories means more than the one filled with decorations. A heartfelt conversation becomes more meaningful than a new purchase. You become more interested in collecting moments than collecting things. You realize that the most valuable possessions are things that can't be bought. Time, health, relationships, peace of mind. Material items can be lost, stolen, or outgrown, but the experiences you create, the love you give, and the wisdom you gain, those stay with you. You may even find yourself giving things away, not because you no longer value them, but because you've learned what truly matters. You declutter not just your closet, but your soul. The need to impress fades. The desire to live lightly, intentionally, meaningfully grows. You stop asking, what can I get? And start asking, what can I give? And that shift, from accumulation to contribution, is where fulfillment lives. When you stop comparing and start appreciating, when you stop hoarding and start sharing, you begin to understand the essence of a life well lived. It isn't about keeping up, it's about slowing down. It's about noticing, it's about connecting, and in doing so, you don't just age, you evolve. As you move through life, especially past the age of 61, one of the most healing realizations is that regret doesn't have to control you. In your younger years, regret often sits heavy on your shoulders. It whispers that you should have made a different choice, taken a different path, said something, or stayed silent. You replay moments from the past like a broken record, convinced that if only you could go back and fix them, your life would be different. Regret feeds the illusion that the past is more powerful than the present. It traps you in a cycle of self-blame and what-ifs that steals your ability to move forward. But with time and perspective, you begin to see regret differently. You start to understand that mistakes were not meant to shame you, they were meant to shape you. Every wrong turn, every failed relationship, every missed opportunity becomes part of your education. Regret doesn't disappear, but it transforms. It goes from being a chain that holds you down to a tool that lifts you up. You learn that there's wisdom in your wounds, and the past is not a prison. It's a classroom. You stop seeing yourself as broken and begin to recognize the strength that came from surviving what you once thought would break you. The power of regret fades when you forgive yourself, not because you did everything right, but because you now understand that you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. Growth means extending to yourself the same grace you often give others. You stop punishing yourself for not knowing what you know now. That shift in mindset opens the door to peace. You begin to focus less on rewriting the past and more on writing the next chapter with clarity and courage. The past becomes a place of reference, not residence. What also becomes clear later in life is the myth that it's too late to start over. When you're younger, the fear of beginning again can be paralyzing. There's this belief that if something hasn't happened by a certain age, it probably never will. Society creates invisible timelines that tell you when you're supposed to graduate, settle down, succeed, retire. And if you don't follow that path exactly, you feel like you're behind or failing. But by the time you're in your 60s and beyond, you realize something powerful. Life doesn't follow a single script. There is no deadline for becoming who you were always meant to be. You can start over at any age, whether it's picking up a new skill, changing careers, falling in love again, or moving to a new place. You discover that beginnings are not reserved for the young. They are reserved for the willing. What you lacked in youth, experience, perspective, resilience, you now have in abundance. You are not starting from scratch, you're starting from strength. Every new chapter carries the weight of everything you've already lived and learned. And that makes the next move not just possible, but powerful. Fear doesn't fully disappear with age, but your relationship with it changes. You stop letting it dictate your life. You begin to ask, what's the worst that could happen? And realize you've already survived worse. You've outlived doubts, endured heartbreak, rebuilt after loss. Starting over isn't as scary when you trust your own ability to rebuild. You understand that failure is just a step forward in disguise. You become less afraid of falling and more committed to flying, even if it's your first flight at 65. There's a quiet kind of bravery in beginning again later in life. It says, I'm not done. I still have something to give. I still have dreams worth chasing. And that mindset keeps your spirit alive. You're not too old, too late, or too far gone. You're right on time to begin again, on your own terms, in your own way, with everything you've become.